I always hated the summer cabin. It sounds strange, I know, but it's true. My parents adored the place, and every year we spend at least a week there, sometimes longer if they could manage it. Once they even insisted we celebrate Christmas there, which was as miserable as you'd imagine. The cabin sat on the edge of Lake Erie, a modest two-bedroom structure with a loft nestled beneath sagging eaves. It had a cramped kitchen, a cozy living room with a fireplace, and two small bedrooms downstairs, one shared by my older sisters, Clara and June, and one that belonged to me. Mom and Dad always claimed the loft, leaving me alone in the smaller of the two bedrooms. Alone with them. The floorboards in the cabin were old and worn, riddled with wide gaps that let you peer straight down into the crawl space beneath. Dad always promised he'd fix them, but he never did. They've held up this long, he'd say. They weren't splintery, so I guess he figured it wasn't worth the effort. But splinters weren't the problem. I didn't notice the strange noises right away. First summer, I was too busy being enchanted by the place. It felt magical, our very own cabin by the lake. I spent the days swimming, canoeing, climbing trees, and chasing fireflies until I collapsed into bed each night. I slept deeply, dreaming of adventures to come. But as the days passed, the cabin's charm began to wane. I started hearing odd noises coming from beneath the floor. At first, it was faint, a shuffling, scuttling sound like rats or bugs. Dad shrugged it off when I mentioned it, saying, "It's just critters. These old cabins are full of them." He set traps in the kitchen, but they were always empty. I wished it were rats. By the second summer, the noises were impossible to ignore. I'd lie awake in bed, listening as the scratching grew louder. It wasn't random like you'd expect from animals. It was deliberate, insistent, as though something or someone was moving with purpose. One night I saw it. The faint moonlight streaming through the cabin window was just enough to illuminate the gaps in the floorboards. I peeked over the side of my bed, and I saw fingers, thin, pale fingers with jagged, broken nails probing up through the cracks, pushing against the boards as though testing their strength. I froze, paralyzed with fear. My 10-year-old mind couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. I squeezed my eyes shut and prayed for sleep, hoping it was all a nightmare. It wasn't. The summer I turned 12, we stayed at the cabin for 2 weeks. A storm had knocked out the power at home, and my parents decided we'd wait it out by the lake. I begged them to let me stay with my aunt in town, but they wouldn't hear of it. "It'll be fun," Mom insisted. That first night, I couldn't sleep. The scratching started almost immediately, louder and more frantic than I'd ever heard. I clutched my flashlight and the baseball bat I'd brought, determined not to be caught off guard. When I saw the fingers pushing through the gaps again, I swung the bat with all my strength. The fingers recoiled, but they didn't retreat entirely. Instead, an eye, bloodshot and unblinking, peered up at me through the cracks, and I screamed. Dad burst into the room seconds later, gun in hand. He stared at the warped floorboards and the faint traces of blood smeared across them. He didn't ask questions. He just grabbed me and ushered the rest of the family upstairs to the loft. The police came the next morning. They searched the crawl space and surrounding woods, but found nothing except some disturbed dirt and an old rusted gate that had been pried open. It wasn't until years later that Dad told me what the sheriff had said. The cabin's previous owners, a family of 5, had vanished without a trace. Search parties combed the area, but no bodies were ever found. The only clue was in the children's bedroom. Floorboards warped and splintered as though something had forced its way through. That was the last summer we spent at the cabin. My parents sold it the following year. I still have nightmares about those fingers, about that unblinking eye. Sometimes in my dreams, the floorboards crack open entirely, and I see what's waiting beneath. A sea of pale, skeletal bodies, all reaching, clawing, desperate to escape. If you ever see a cabin for sale on Lake Erie, be cautious, do your homework. There might be more in the foundation than just termites.